Welcome to our experiments in prayer. I'm here this evening with Brahmachari Premdas. I am Nayaswami Devarshi, and it's a joy to talk about this topic of working with prayer. Tonight, I'm going to talk about more working with the art and the feeling of working with prayer. We have tools and we have techniques for everything that we're doing. And we could say the same for throughout this year of all the different topics we'll be talking about. But it's the same with prayer. I'll use an example. Prayer has art and science aspect to it, the way our gurus taught it, just like Kriya Yoga. And Swami Kriyanandaji said about Kriya, he said, Kriya is not mechanical in the results that it gives. And it's the same with prayer. Different people's prayers have more effect and more power, and it's not because those people are necessarily more powerful in a way, but it's more that they have tuned into divine compassion and divine awakening and divine understanding, and they're practicing prayer with this art, intuitive understanding of it. But one part of that art of it, which I'll talk about here, is really trying to awaken divine feeling and compassion in our hearts. Swami Kriyanandaji would tell a story about Mother Teresa of Calcutta. And her nuns would do a lot of praying for people during difficult times. But when she really felt there was a really urgent need for prayers for a person, for a situation, she would always ask the newest nuns to do that praying. And there was a reason why she would ask, because these newer nuns who were younger, they had more of this innocence, a purity of heart, a trust, and maybe some of the older ones that had been around the block a few times and they'd seen a lot of suffering, and maybe they'd seen unanswered prayers, and maybe there was a little bit of doubt, or, oh, I've done this before, and a little bit of, we've been here before. But the newer nuns would have this sort of an emotional human compassion and feeling. But when you work with prayer, you use human feeling and compassion, which is a starting point, but it can be too emotional, because divine compassion and empathy is not emotional, it's not agitated. But we start with our human feeling. But when we work with human feeling, compassion, sympathy for others, and then tune into Divine Mother's grace, her unconditional love for all equally, from a point of almost impersonalness, in the sense that divine love is not personal. Divine love doesn't love this person's nice, beautiful blue eyes, or this person's color of their hair, or anything like that, or their personality. Divine love sees all equally. And so when we take this human feeling and lift it up and offer it up into the divine, then it starts to turn human feeling into divine feeling. And so this is how we work with the art of prayer, with the intuition of prayer. And so again, we'll work with the techniques a little bit, but just try to see that the techniques are a tool, one, for focusing this feeling. It's just like a magnifying glass, where you can take a magnifying glass and hold it under the sun and have the sun shine through it and focus it, and even start a leaf on fire. We used to do this as children because it just focuses the sun's light really intensely. But if there's no strong light there, then it's not focusing much. There's not much intensity to focus. And so it needs both. It needs the vehicle and the tool for doing the focusing, and then the powerful divine light flowing through that vehicle and those techniques of working with prayer. I like to work with prayer a way I think that Swamiji often did. When he had his office where he would do his writing at his home in Pune years ago, and there was a poster on that wall of that office, maybe it's still there, and it's one of his own sayings. And that quote of his, which was important enough for him to put on his office wall to see and to remind himself, it said, "Joy will be yours when you can hold the griefs of others up to God's love for his comfort. Joy will be yours when you can hold the griefs of others up to God's love for his comfort. And it's just a very interesting quote, because I believe that's how he tended to pray. And when he was praying for individuals, and he would pray for individuals, he would have a list of just a handful of names written down in his very impossible to read handwriting in his meditation room. And I don't know that he would do the whole technical techniques. I just think that he would go deep into meditation. I may be wrong, but this is what I think. He would go deep into meditation, and he would offer the griefs, the pain, the suffering of those people to Divine Mother, to the Guru, from his heart to God for comfort. Now, why do we need to do this? Because Divine Mother knows already who's suffering and who needs it. Well, I think she knows, but she wants us to act in this way. She, I think, wants us to call to her and say, oh, Divine Mother, my brother, my sister here, they're really suffering. Please, please, come to them, bless them, heal their heart from the despair that they're feeling. And I think Divine Mother wants us to do that, and she set up this whole, I hate to call it a game, but a system to get us to reach out to her on behalf of our brothers and sisters, partly for our sake, to open our hearts to her love. Because when we can tune into others' suffering in that way, we start to tune into divine love, and we start to act as an instrument for that love, and even over time more than just an instrument for that love, but we are that love, and we're able to express it and share it. And that's why joy will be yours, when we can hold the griefs of others up in that way. But it also gives results when we pray in this way. And this is why some people's prayers are very, very powerful. And I think it's because they've tuned into this awakening of the divine feeling in their hearts, that compassion, and connecting to the Divine Mother, to the Guru, and saying, please heal this person, heal my friend, heal my sister, my brother. And so try to work more with prayer in that way, especially. Don't just do it mechanically. The techniques are good, but when the techniques have the light of compassion and empathy in our hearts sent through that lens of the technique, then it becomes very powerful. There's a chant that we'll do, and I find this chant really helpful as a way of getting an understanding of what I'm talking about. It's one of Yoganandaji's chants, and it's partly tuning into some of the words of Christ. And the words of the chant are, they have heard thy name, the blind, the halt, the lame. They have come to thy door. Give them an audience, Lord. Give them an audience. And then it goes on, they have heard thy name. Those who are in despair, wipe thou their tears. They have come to thy door. Give them an audience. And then the third stanza, they have heard thy name. Those who are drowned in sin. I forget that when I chant it, I'll remember the words. But the words are in the chat for you to read as we're chanting. So those who are drowned in sin, to whom will they go? They have no one, Lord. They have no one. Do not turn them away. And so this chant is beautiful for awakening our own deep compassion, divine compassion, and then praying for others from that point. There's a couple really nice versions on YouTube if you want to do it with it. But one thing I do is when I chant this chant, I will actually pray for people as I'm doing the chant, because I find that while doing this chant, my heart is open, and then I can offer up visually in my spiritual eye, someone who's suffering, someone who's in despair, someone who's sinned, who's really messed up their lives. And there's a tendency sometimes to judge people, and this wipes away all judgment. I also find that when I sing this chant, that it also helps to remove any judgment of myself for making mistakes, for messing up, for not being the highest version of myself and stumbling. And I find that when I sing this chant, it somehow frees me to go to God and say, yeah, I'm trying my best, and I offer myself at your feet for thy healing, for thy grace, for thy love. So we'll do this chant a few times through. But as we're singing it, tune into the feeling of this chant and feel the power of this awakening of the heart's love, of divine love. And then even close the eyes and offer the names or the visual of someone who is in despair, someone who is, paying their karmic price for making a mistake, and asking Divine Mother, forgive them for that. They're your child. You shouldn't be letting them suffer like this. And so we'll use this chant almost as a vehicle for healing prayers. They have heard thy name, the blind talked and lame. They have heard thy name, the blind talked and lame. They have come to thy door, Lord. They have come to thy door. Give them an audience, Lord. They have heard thy name, the blind talked and lame. They have heard thy name, the blind talked and lame. Those who are in despair, wipe thou their tears. Those who are in despair, wipe thou their tears. They have come to thy door, Lord. They have come to thy door. Give them an audience, Lord. They have heard thy name. He talked and lame. They have heard thy name. The blind talked and lame. Those who are drowned in sin, to whom will they go? Those who are drowned in sin, to whom will they go? They have no one, Lord. They have no one. Do not turn them away. They have heard thy name, the blind talked and lame. They have heard thy name, the blind talked and lame. Those who are in despair, wipe thou their tears. Those who are in despair, wipe thou their tears. They have come to thy door, Lord. They have come to thy door. Give them an audience. They have heard thy name, the blind talked and lame. They have heard thy name, the blind talked and lame. Those who are drowned in sin, to whom will they go? Those who are drowned in sin, to whom will they go? They have no one, Lord. They have no They have heard thy name, the blood exalted name. And for a few more moments, let's hold the griefs, the suffering of someone up, offering it from the heart to the spiritual eye, to Divine Mother, for her grace, for her healing, for her love. Om. Amen. So experiment with this. I think maybe I'll put a link in the chat to a very nice Ananda version of this chant that you can do the same. But at least experiment with praying with this intensity of feeling and also perhaps using the techniques. But this really gives prayer the real power when we work with this awakened feeling of compassion, kindness, which really is the art of prayer. And now Premdas will share a few things here.
Thank you very much, Devashiji. That was excellent. I think we all can take that home and start implementing right away. And today, I would like to share about this book, Loved and Protected. This is by Asha Swami. These are all stories of how prayers are answered. So in this book, in the introduction, I would just like to read you from the introduction. Asha ji says, "Before I wrote this book, if you had asked me, do you believe in the power of prayer? Without hesitation, I would have said, yes. I have lived in the spiritual community for more than 40 years, and the evidence is all around me. Still, I was not prepared for what I saw in the eyes of those who shared their stories with me. All these stories are in this book. And how tenderly, how sensitively, how personally God responds, not just to the prominent or talented, the rich or articulate, but to everyone who sincerely calls to Him." Paramahamsa Yogananda ji says, God feels for us. He is not partial to a few, but listens to everyone who approaches Him trustingly. His children should ever have implicit faith in the loving kindness of their omnipresent Father. So these are the words again which Devashiji started today's talk with, how God really watches our heart, and if we are sincere, He really listens to it. And even if a child is unable to put words in paragraphs, or Master's first poem about his fish, when his fish had died and he wanted to save it, and that was his first poem, even though it did not matter, God listens to your heart. And so today I would like to share one story from here. This is by Nayaswami Anandi. Also, it's also a nice time for us to keep her in prayer. She's been having a health condition and hospice care has been given to her. So we can also keep her in our prayers and also enjoy to this miraculous story. It's called as Happy Ending. So in this story, it revolves around it's the story about Anandiji's mother. At this time, maybe around 12 years back when she was writing this, her Anandiji's mother was 92 years old. So she used to stay in St. Louis, Missouri. So this was further away. Anandiji used to stay in California. She had few siblings, but they also used to stay somewhere near Missouri. But her mother, she was alone, and she lived in this large big house. And even though she was 92 and she had gone few times to emergency room, she was just fine with it. She was just happy to stay in this large big home. And Anandiji's sister, or the siblings, were also medical professionals. And her sister said, that our mother is like an accident about to happen. We just have to take care. You somehow take care. She's telling to Anandiji that take her and make sure that she's with someone so that she gets some assistance whenever she's needed. So until now, Anandiji was little anxious, but now she became concerned. And now, what will all the devotees do? She took this into her meditation. She first prayed and meditated and took this, offered it up, like she was saying to God, this anxiousness and this concern for her mother. And then in the meditation, she got this calm presence and calm answer that it said, all will be well. So whenever we have any problems, we also, when we can take this in our meditation, offer it to God, and then the calm presence and their intuition can guide us. So in this case, Anandiji got this answer, all will be well. And with this in her heart, she called her mother and she told to her mother was a strong-willed person. She wouldn't listen to anyone. So always Anandiji would be like, okay, how about I come there for a week? Let's just research some options. And then whenever you feel like you can move there. And her mother said yes. And so Anandiji flew there. And within 1 week's time, before Anandiji came back, she already moved to a different independent society. This was still not assisted living, but she was in an independent society, a small apartment, and she had a beautiful garden outside her. And this was very good news for her, Anandiji and her sister. So this is the first part. Now, after some time, this was like before even 2 years had passed in this new place, Anandiji's mother her body started failing and with age, and she also had internal bleeding. So each time she had to go to doctor, and there was this blood diffusion used to happen. And during this time, one of the times, the doctor there recommended that she'll have to move to a living where she's assisted by others. And so her mother calls Anandiji on phone and says, she's in all this desperation. She's so much down and exhausted. She's calling from the hospital bed. She calls to Anandiji and says, I have all this money, but I don't know, I can't even eat. Maybe I should have joined Ananda. This is like after 40 years of Anandiji joining Ananda, this was the first time even her mother was slightly inclining that this was a good decision and supporting her. So this somehow Anandiji thought, oh, okay. And but also at the same time, she could feel her mother's pain and this thing. So then she wrote to Swamiji over email, Swami Kriyanandaji, that about her mother. Swami Kriyanandaji had met Anandiji's mother whenever she had come over to Ananda village to visit Anandiji. So during this time, now Swami Kriyanandaji email has gone and it's in his court also. Now next day, Anandiji calls her mother. And for the first time, somehow things have changed. And she's with some joy, new energy. And she also, about a year back, Anandiji had given a book of master to her. And now she's not only reading it, but enjoying it. And she also quoted during that talk to Anandiji, conditions are neutral. It's like depending on how we respond to them, it's happy or sad. So even this she remembered. This was like brightening up Anandiji's heart, that she's also opening her own heart for this, her mother. And this was such good news. And Anandiji calls this as one of the amazing, this talk, this what phone call she had. And then after the phone call, she checks her email and she sees Swami Kriyanandaji also has started praying for her mother. This was such good news. And then I would like to read out this last small paragraph. What Anandiji concludes by saying that later, after that, every time I spoke to my mother, she was bursting with goodwill and love for all. Even people she had criticized in the past, she now saw in a kindly light. Soon I went for a visit. The change was dramatic. She looked years younger. She was funny, and full of life. She expressed the greatest kindness and appreciation for all. That last month of her life, she was the happiest, most loving I have ever known her to be. At the end, by the grace of God, I was there when she passed peacefully away. Just such a, as the title suggests, a happy ending. So I think whenever we have God in our lives, He not only takes care of us, but all our loved ones, and they are there to take care of them. So yeah, if you would like another publication, Loud and Protected, we would highly recommend this book. A lot of short stories and prayers. And now I would like to pass it back to Devashiji, where he'll share some activity for this coming week. And Devashiji, sorry, you're muted. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Ramdas. That was a very, very beautiful story of prayer. The power of prayer to change people's consciousness. So here's another homework assignment for everyone, which is just another practice to do this week, in addition to what we talked about, which is to experiment with praying for everybody you see. And it could be during one single day, it can be during the week, but everyone you see, the first moment you see them, your family members, people out on the street, the people in your office, just everywhere you look, just send just a little prayer burst of just Om Guru or just Om Divine Mother, just sending light to each person. And do this for half a day or a day with joy. No, this is not something to do with tension and exertion, but just as a joyful, just fun way of just spreading sweetness and light everywhere you go. So experiment with that also this week as a really good activity to learn the power of prayer.